Hello and welcome to everyone across the nation joining today's workshop on how to add and manage user accounts. This workshop focuses on using CASAS eTest Online together with TOPS Pro Enterprise Online for adding and managing users and enabling access to your online database. This function is available with both basic and enhanced access. In other words, no TOPS Pro Enterprise license is required. User accounts can be added by the TE Enhanced or ET Basic user at your agency. In other words, the primary individual at your agency managing your data. This is one of 23 complementary CASAS Online implementation workshops. This is a training room set up to conduct all 23 workshops. However, you are not expected to attend all workshops in this training room. We do recommend, though, attending as many as possible to learn about best practices, ask questions, and to become confident in using the online system. Online help documentation is available on our website under Training and Support, eTest Help Documentation, and TE Help Documentation. Please be sure to bookmark these as your electronic go-to resources, particularly the CASAS eTest Online Guide, which provides information covered in these workshops. We are in the process of updating the guide as we prepare for the 2015 National Summer Institute. We have information on our website about the National Summer Institute at the end of June. Please visit our website to learn more about the Institute and all of the benefits for coming. We would love to see you. Today's workshop will cover Section 8.10, and this is under the Data Management section. Let me just increase this view here. Section 8.10, Adding Users. Those of you who participated in the workshop preceding this, we talked about access groups, and I know that's a very involved topic. It's important to understand, folks, how the online system treats access depending on the rights that you have enabled to menus and data. We advocate managing your users through access groups. Manage them on a global basis. So this is why we presented the access groups workshop first, and now we're following up with adding users. So before we get started, I just want to emphasize where your agency will be set up to produce live data. We refer to this as the production server, and the main domain name, and I've entered that in the chat box, is etestsonline.org. You can access the CASAS Online system from any computer with internet connection. It doesn't have to be your office workstation. It can be a laptop that travels to different locations, even from your home. You can access both TOPS Pro Enterprise as well as CASAS eTest Online. It's only at the point that you are using a specific machine to administer a CASAS test that that machine itself has to be registered on the CASAS hosted server. Otherwise, you have access to the online system, CASAS eTest or TOPS Pro Enterprise, from any machine that has an internet connection. We also give you access to our simulation server, Rolling Hills Adult School, with fictional data that refreshes nightly. Please use Rolling Hills to experiment and explore so that you can feel comfortable in trying out new things, kind of a cause and effect type of scenarios and role play. Use this for in-house staff training, all the while without risk of compromising your live data. You will find information on how to access the simulation server from the eTest help documentation, Getting Started, and right here, simulation server here. We have several generic login accounts, and in this workshop I'm going to demonstrate the levels of access by signing in under each user credential. So with that, let's go ahead and get into today's workshop. I'll go directly here to adding users. This is a step-by-step tutorial on stepping you through how to add a user account. Now, to enable access to CASAS eTest Online, you will need to contact the CASAS Technology Support Team by sending an email to techsupport@casas.org authorizing CASAS to enable coordinator and or proctor access to CASAS eTest Online. You as the local agency are not given the ability to grant proctor or coordinator access to CASAS eTest Online. This is solely controlled by CASAS due to adherence to test security. Now, rather than viewing this document and talking about it, I'm actually going to discuss or demonstrate this document. So if you have it handy, feel free to take notes along the way. And with that, let's go ahead and launch Enterprise. You can launch Enterprise either from your web browser, clicking TE Client, or from an icon placed in your system tray or on your desktop, or if you prefer to have the icon in your system tray so that you have the convenience of keeping application windows open. That's my preference, so I'm going to click the TE icon in my system tray to launch TOPS Pro Enterprise. Please be mindful of the server for which you are attempting to connect. The simulation server, Rolling Hills Adult School, is titled eTest Simulation. This here, eTest Online, with eTest Online, this is your production database. So this is one of the generic accounts. Whoops, let me sign here, admin. I'll sign in as an administrator who is in the TE Enhanced Access group. So I have the ability, whether I'm a TE Enhanced user or an ET Basic user, I have the ability to add a new user to my account. So let's kind of role play here, folks. Let's say you have an individual at your agency who is going to serve as a proctor for you, and that's their only involvement with regards to CASAS eTest Online. So when they notify you, either by a copy of their certificate or just simply notify you that they completed training, now proof of completion is a copy of the certificate, then you will want to open up TOPS Pro Enterprise Online, and let me increase the view here so it makes it easier on your eyes. From the organization menu, select Users. You have the option at this point to select sites to create a user account at a site level only. In other words, granting access to that individual only at the site. If you do that, then the individual would not have access to any other sites set up in your agency online database. If you add users at the parent level, and for those of you who have been with me for a while, we talked about the TOPS Pro Enterprise, that it is a relational database, and so there are parent-child relations. So there's always a parent record and child records. We talked about that in the context of students. A student demographic record is the parent record of a student, and child records are tests, class enrollments, and program enrollments, and so forth. With regards to your organizational structure of your online database, your agency is the parent record, the sites are the child records. Okay. So you can create users at the parent level. If you do, then anything below that level, users will have access to. If you opt to go with site-based users, let's say you are, and we do have some community college districts that are very huge, and they have, say, maybe 3 primary campuses, north, south, and central, as an example. And then within those primary campuses, they have several satellite campuses. So there could be sub-sites of these sites here. So if you have someone who is primarily at, and I'll just, since I have this highlighted, I'll say East Campus, primarily responsible for management of anything that goes on at the East Campus, as well as any satellite campuses, which would be subsites of East Campus, then you may be inclined to add the user to the East Campus. Now that user will not have access to data in these other site, what we call containers. Okay. Now, if you have someone who is directed to manage users, say across sites, or manage data across sites, then you would be more inclined to add the user at the parent level. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Folks, please don't hesitate to ask questions along the way. Now, as you see here, I have we have several accounts. We have 50 administrator accounts. We have 50 coordinator accounts, 50 proctor accounts, and 50 teacher accounts. These are all examples of accounts, and I'll demonstrate their levels of access in just a moment. But right now I want to go ahead and add a new user. So to add users, I'm going to click here, New. And just as I pointed out that you could pre-select the level of access from the users list, you can also do likewise from the when you open up the user record. Yes, that's a good question. Only CASAS adds sites. Local users or local agencies are not granted the ability to add additional sites. And here again, this is due to adherence for adherence to test security, because sites are either identified as a testing site or non-testing site. And so CASAS must be notified, all sites. Even if it's a site that you have no intention of administering CASAS tests or CASAS web-based tests specifically, CASAS still needs to be notified of that site so that we can add that to your agency with the appropriate name and contact information. We have supplemental online site agreements that you can submit to us, and you can find that information in the Getting Started section of the eTest help documentation. And here, online site agreement, go ahead and use this as a supplement to, if you are already set up and you need to add additional sites, go ahead and grab a copy of this. It's a fillable PDF, and then submit that. All right. Now, there's a link with existing personnel, and this is a topic that we'll cover next week when we talk about personnel members such as teachers or administrators. You can link directly with an account, a pre-existing account. We're not going to do this at this moment, and we'll talk about personnel next week. So here again, you can select the container. For this example, we'll just keep it at the parent level. User account, we do ask if you would adhere to the work emails for your users. This is a standard user name requested for many organizations, internet-based, and we're just simply recommending to follow suit. And so CASAS will primarily identify users by their email address. It is up to you also to set a temporary password. You can set whatever password you want that you'll give to your new user. You have to enter it twice. And because we advocate managing users through access groups, the next logical step then is to go ahead and add this individual to the access group. Now you see some of the CASAS controlled access groups here, which could be very misleading. Trust me folks, you don't see these in your agency container. We just put them here on the simulation servers so you can experiment and explore with them. But at this point, let's role play. Actually, rather than new user, I'm going to say new proctor. Okay. And change the password here. Okay, so let's say we have a new proctor, and you can stop right there. You don't have to put them in an access group. If all you are going to grant them is proctor access to the CASAS online system, then you don't need to put them in an access group. And if that's your decision, then the next step is to go to user account, give them a title, first and last name. You can enter phone. Email is required. And you can also give them a state. This is the minimal information. Well, truthfully, first and last name really is all, and email is all. But we do ask if you would at least identify the state, and phone number is always helpful too. So folks, if this is a user that you are only electing to grant access to perform functions as a proctor, accessing CASAS e-Test Online, you can stop right there and save the record, send an email to techsupport@casas.org authorizing CASAS to place this new proctor in an e-Test proctor access group, and then we'll give you confirmation back. You do not need to enable any menu access rights because these menu access rights only have an effect in TOPS Pro Enterprise. They have no effect in CASAS e-Test. So if you are not granting this individual access to Enterprise, then you don't do anything, and we're advocating don't do anything on individual user accounts. Instead, just keep their account without any access rights, individual access rights enabled. The same holds true on data. Just keep the data in no access rights enabled so that they totally inherit the access rights through the CASAS controlled access group. So let's say you save this account. So just to recap, select the container, select the container, enter in user identification, that becomes their login user credentials, add a first and last name, email, save. That's it. Notify CASAS to place this user in the ET Proctor Access group. So at that point, we will open up your online database. We will go to this user. And actually, I'm going to click off of this for just a moment. Let's just refresh this. We'll generally go to your user account. We'll either filter, sort, or as you saw me, I just scrolled to this user. So here's the new user. Notice that user is in no access groups at all. So even though there's a user account, this user has no access to Enterprise or e-Test. So what CASAS will do at this point, we will double click to open up that record. We will enable editing on user identification and put that person in the ET Proctor Access group, add, and save. Here again, this user account, we've done nothing to menu or data access rights. This user is going to inherit access rights granted to proctors, and in this case it's only access to e-Test, no access to TOPS Pro Enterprise. Oh, that's right, and I'm being reminded that CASAS will add a contact ID as that user is identified in our contact database. Now notice back over here, let me refresh. Notice now this proctor is now in the ET Proctor Access group. This proctor has no access to Enterprise as indicated by this access groups column. There is no, this user is not in a TE access group. Now let's say that you do want your proctors or whomever to also have access to Enterprise. Then at the time you are adding the account, you certainly can go ahead and place them at that time in one of your local agency TE or agency-controlled TE access groups. Once you select the group, you do have to click Add, because that doesn't automatically add them when you're just simply selecting. You have to intentionally add and then save the record. Going back over here, refreshing our screen. Now you see that this proctor is in one eTest Access group and one TOPS Pro Enterprise Access group. This individual will inherit, and I'll go over here to the organization menu to access groups. They are in the ET Proctor Access group, which you actually don't see the rights enabled here because they are not even accessible to the local user. But the Proctor Access group has to access the management console and supervise test administration, as well as assist in registering computers. The General Proctor TE Access group, here's all the members here. Notice that Proctor has access to limited menus as well as limited data functions. Any user that you have in your online database should only be in one TOPS Pro Enterprise Access group, and if they are involved with testing, then they should only be in one CASAS eTest Access group. The online system functions on what's called the principle of least privileges. So if you happen to put your users in more than one TOPS Pro Enterprise Access group, I'll tell you right off, folks, that will not work. They will forever have conflicting rights between the access rights you've enabled on those various enterprise access groups. So please be sure to identify the roles of your users. In other words, it's best to keep access rights on individual user accounts in the inherited state. Let me go back to this Proctor account. And what I mean by inherited state is that all boxes are shaded, both on menu and data access rights, so that users are sure to inherit their access through these groups in which they are a member. It is only if a user within a group needs access, say, to additional menus or data functions, that would be the exception, not the norm. That would be the exception to where you would go identify that individual, go to their individual user account, and perhaps check on, and I'm not sure, this probably won't make sense. I'll just check on all records here. Well, notice how this has a simultaneous effect. If you only want one or two boxes within a primary menu, it's best to go from the bottom up. Otherwise, what you saw me do, if you click at the parent level of that menu, this records here is this records menu here. It simultaneously checks everything below, and if you don't want them to have access to this, you have to return all of these back to the inherited state, just to single click on one particular area. This would be an example of overriding what the access group would otherwise deny. The same holds true with data access rights. I can go through and either clear any shading to completely deny access where the access group would otherwise grant, or I can check anything here to grant access where the access group would otherwise deny. Now, if you find that things are getting a little bit wacky, then I would say reset the user account by using this button that says Clear All Rights. So clicking that will reset the user account back to its inherited, back to an inherited state like this. And then just make sure they are only in two access groups. Now, if you find you are starting to augment too many individual accounts, then it's time to reevaluate user roles and perhaps create another access group at that time. As mentioned in the previous workshop, there are Every agency should have a basic TE access group, coordinator TE access, proctor TE access, teacher, one or the other, teacher basic or teacher enhanced. These are pre-formatted access groups applied to your agency containers for which you can augment, you can delete them, you can copy them, rename them, but this is for your benefit to have a pre-configured access group, because the topic of access groups, rights and permission, as well as individual user accounts, rights and permissions, combined with the principle of least privileges, and add the fact that it's users and access groups have function on a three-state model, inherited, granted, or denied access. It can get very complicated, folks. So in a nutshell, when you have users and you want to add them to your database, simply add the user account in a very basic fashion and then put them in an access group. And if they, a TE access group, if you want them to have access to your data management application. If they also need access to CASAS eTest, then send an email to techsupport@casas.org, and we will place them in an eTest access group. Now, before we end, what I want to do quickly, I signed on as an administrator who has access to every single menu and data function, but I want to sign on as a coordinator with TE access, and they have coordinator functions in eTest. So you can see limited menu access here, limited menus from the records menu, limited reports. So anything that's shaded is non-accessible, but you do have access to the boldface items, and then the help menu. No access to the tools menu. Proctors is even limited further. No access to the organization menu. Same type of access to the records menu. Reports, pretty much the same. Okay. But I can tell you proctors have read-only access. They have no editing ability. Now let's take an example of a teacher. Teacher basic, say. I can't remember. No, actually, I think my examples in here are teacher enhanced. Because those of you who have an enhanced access, when you have teachers, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, teachers can be granted access to their class instance so that they can manage their own classes. Not tomorrow. I'm being reminded next week. Now another question here, do we create new access groups or just eCASAS creates those? We will not add any more access groups. When an agency is first added to the online system, it's at that point that we will copy, oops, I can't get into access groups here. Let me pop over to this document here. When we first add your agency to the online database, we will apply a basic TE access group, a coordinator TE access group, a proctor TE access group, and depending on if you are a basic or an enhanced user, we'll put one of these teacher access groups. So initially, we will apply 4 examples, if you want to call them, of TE access groups to your agency container. You can delete them, you can duplicate them, rename them, you can augment them, you can add and remove members from those groups, but we will not add any of your users to a TOPS Pro Enterprise access group. Just like you cannot authorize or grant access to e-tests, CASAS cannot authorize or grant access to TE for your users. CASAS solely controls access to e-test. You, as the agency, solely control access to enterprise with your users. Does that make sense? And let's see, the other question, we only put people in access groups that need to go to ET and TOPS Pro, correct? Well, the only thing that you're controlling with your users is notifying CASAS to enable access to e-tests, and then you putting your users or those that you plan to grant access to enterprise in a TE access group. And then you can, we just kept generic titles. If you have counselors and you want to create a counselor TE access group, or you want to create a clerk TE access group, or whatever that may be, they can be as limited as can be. In other words, you can create a group that perhaps even has only access to one menu and one function within that menu. But the point being is that you, for some reason, they need access, however broad or limited, to enterprise. You have full control over that. So manage all of your users, regardless of if they're e-test users or enterprise users. Manage all users through access groups. This is what we are advocating for optimal system performance. Because trust me, it will get very complicated, confusing, and frustrating if you try to manage user access from their individual accounts. Consider that only the exception when you have a user who is already a member of a group that you need to either elevate their access in a certain area or deny access in a certain area, all the while keeping them in an access group. So folks, that ends it for today's workshop. I'm hoping that I haven't just complicated matters. Use Rolling Hills Adult School to log on under these different types of credentials, and so that you can experiment and explore the type of access that is granted to those users. And just real quick again, you won't see any of the CASAS controlled access groups listed, these groups specifically. You will not see any of these access groups listed in your agency container. These are only accessible by CASAS. You will see them on Rolling Hills Adult School, however, because we wanted you to see how those access groups behave. Okay? All right. If you have any further questions, folks, don't hesitate to contact us. Let me give you the email here. We have a fabulous team. At techsupport@casas.org. Commit that email address to memory. We have lots of members of that team to ensure that you receive a timely response. So I would just make a habit of corresponding through tech support and to get answers to any questions that you may have. With that, folks, we're going to end today unless there's any last-minute questions. Alrighty then, folks. Thank you so much for your participation. Have a great day and a fabulous weekend.